You had one job, Leslie Headland. One job. The job you gave yourself. Make the Jedi into the bad guys. And you failed. Well, that's not exactly true. It's actually worse. She did the opposite. She made the Jedi look based. I'm watching the first 10 minutes of this show just giggling every 5 seconds. You're supposed to be showing how the Jedi are flawed and misguided, and instead, you made them look reasonable.
How do you fuck that up? How do you fuck that up?
Everything about this episode is backwards and vague and nonsensical. Let's go through it because this is another one of those episodes where you need to watch it to understand how not to tell stories. It's another flashback to 16 years ago on Brenda. The trick with this episode is that it's showing the things that we saw in the Fingerbanger one, but from a different perspective. Now, keep in mind, the point of the series is to show how the Jedi are flawed and the bad guys. So you'd expect that how they end up on planet Lebeau is somehow nefarious. Nope, they're literally just doing research. The planet has been barren for years, now it's a lush Eden, and they're trying to figure out why. That's it. That immediately undermines the claims that Mother Anastasia made about the Jedi hunting the space witches because the Jedi don't even know they're on the planet. Right from the start, the writers ruined their own plot point. And it's gonna get worse. So much worse. So, the Jedi collect plant samples and then take a break. Padawan Torben voices his frustration over the mission. He's bored and he wants to go home. But mostly he thinks that the mission isn't important. His master Indara checks him, telling him that it's really important to find out how this planet has life because it's not something that just happens. It's probably the result of the Force creating life through emergence. But Torben still doesn't care, so Sol chimes in to pretty it up to make Torben more interested, but it doesn't work. This scene is here for 2 reasons. 1, to set up why Torben later goes on a 10-year meditative state. I know that sounds stupid, but trust me, it's way dumber than you think. And 2, to set up why Sol is so interested in Osha. And that's because he doesn't have a Padawan. Indara confronts him about his comments, telling him that she wants Torben to get to the truth of things on his own, but Sol disagrees, and Indara tells him that's probably why he doesn't have a Padawan, and to stop projecting his feelings onto Torben. This is a recurring theme in the episode, and technically it'd be fine if we got an important piece of information. Why Sol does that? But we don't. It's never mentioned in the show. He just has these feelings for reasons. They have the time to explain this. It can be a couple of lines. It take all of 30 seconds. Just give us something to explain why he's so emotional. But no, we don't get anything. Then the Jedi split up, and that's when Sol stumbles onto Osha and May at the tree. He sees that they have the Force and follows them. They get caught by their other mother and taken back to the compound. Sol can't open the door, so he climbs Mount Vagina and sees the girls battle training inside. Sol reports this to Indara, and we get this line from Torben that these women must be witches of Dathomir, and Indara is like, please, they're too good for this show. That really is the tone. But that's not the important part. The important part is her reaction to hearing about the space witches. See, we were told in previous episodes that the Jedi don't tolerate any other types of Force users, which begs the question of why there are witches on Dathomir. So you'd expect that Indara's response would be to immediately contact the Jedi Order for instructions on how to take down this cult. But no, her response is that the Jedi's policy is to not interfere. I'll repeat that. In the show where we've been told that the Jedi don't allow other Force user groups, the Jedi's official response is to leave them alone. What is happening? How did you write this and not see the contradiction? The point of the show is that the Jedi are flawed and bad, and when you get the chance to prove that, you have them act reasonable? God. And you would think that maybe they'd get around that by having the Jedi on Brindok do something unjustified. But no, Sol is concerned about the kids being part of a Force cult, which is totally reasonable, so Indara decides to check it out. But Sol is against it because of all the people in the compound, and this is where we get our first little hint of feminist hypocrisy. Indara says that it's just a bunch of women, as if because they're female, they're harmless. As we're about to see, that isn't true, and that's something Indara would have to know being a woman herself and strong in the Force. But I had a feeling we'd get this kind of framing because that's typical with these types of stories. The women are never presented in a negative way, even when they do bad things, like mind-raping a teenage boy. The Jedi break into the compound and arrive right after the ceremony just like in the third episode. But this time, when Anastasia invades Torben's mind, we get to see what she's doing to him. When I called it mind rape, I was being a little hyperbolic. Turns out, that's literally what she does. She violates him. She preys on his desire to go home. She's overtly flirting with him, touching him in a clearly intimate way. She's seducing him, metaphorically and physically, and it's not something he wants because he starts to cry. We have a word for this: sexual assault. Mother Anastasia mind rapes Torben in every meaning of that phrase. And the kicker is that it's not clear from the way it's presented that we're supposed to think she's doing something wrong. The show is kind of ambiguous about a grown woman violating the mind of a teenage boy. And that pretty much kills any chance of me thinking of these witches as benevolent or victims. She's obviously seducing him to the dark side, but she's also violating his mind to do it. That makes her and her little cult the villains, all day long. And I'm sure there are going to be people who defend this or make excuses for this. That's going to fall on deaf ears. I have no patience for people making excuses for abusive women. I have no issue with people telling stories about taboo subjects, but when you try to make the person who abuses people out to be the hero or the victim, I'm not having it. I'm also not having how Torben's violation never gets addressed. After Anastasia lets him go, she agrees to let the twins get tested. Then we get a scene of Torben and Indara, apparently after they've spoken, but we don't know what they talked about, and the incident is never mentioned again. To be honest, Indara doesn't seem all that concerned about what just happened. That's a serious assault on your Padawan's mind. You don't want to make sure he's okay? You don't want to know what the woman did to him? That's a major narrative oversight. In any other story, this would have been an important subplot element. It might even be the reason why someone like Tagalong would exist. This is a motivating factor, an adrenaline moment, as one of my acting teachers called it. A moment Torben would never forget, but it just gets ignored. I'm going to chalk this up to this being a female-centric story. Torben's a boy, so his story doesn't matter. That's the only logical explanation I can give, because it really doesn't make any sense that there's not at least one moment talking about what happened. Instead, we get Sol saying that he wants to take Osha on as his Padawan. Now again, if the Jedi were the villains they've been made out to be, Indara's response would be to support Sol. Instead, she checks him, telling him not to project his feelings onto Osha. She also defends the witches marking May's forehead with a symbol, saying that that's part of their culture. And even with Sol, putting his desire for a Padawan aside, his concern for Osha is reasonable. She didn't finish the ascension. He suspects that this is because she didn't want to go through with it, and he's concerned about how the witches will treat her, and Indara agrees. All of this is reasonable. The Jedi aren't randomly taking children. They're not even trying to take both girls. They're specifically concerned about Osha because it seems like she doesn't want to be part of whatever the space witches are doing, but the women are trying to force her to do it anyway. So, like Sol says, who's going to protect those girls if not the Jedi? Remember, the plan was to make the Jedi look bad, not based. It's just... Oh god. So, Torben takes a sample of May's blood, and then she goes in for the test and obviously lies. Then Indara asks about May's marking and the ascension ceremony, and May doesn't really know anything about what's happening. All she knows is that it's what her mother wants, and she tells Indara what her mother said.
Everyone must walk through fear. Everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny.
Yeah, that's a little sus. Again, they literally had one job. One job they gave themselves. Jedi bad, which is good. And the writers are just fucking this up. Is this on purpose? Please tell me this is on purpose. It can't be this poorly written by accident. This is like watching someone fuck up making a glass of water. I didn't think that was possible. Then Sol tries another approach with Osha, telling her about the Order. This is very manipulative, and this is the one instance where you can call the Jedi out, but even here, there's some logic to it because the Space Witches have so thoroughly indoctrinated the girls that this might be the only way to get Osha to consider the Jedi's offer, at least from the Jedi's perspective. Unbeknownst to them, but knownst to us, Osha is already interested in the Jedi, so her answer is already yes. Indara reports this to the Council. Sol is anxious because he really wants Osha to be his Padawan because he feels some connection to her for no apparent reason. None of this is explained, so it comes across as weird, like Sol is extra desperate for a Padawan. That makes me wonder why the Order hasn't given him one. Maybe they have a good reason. Meanwhile, Torben very much wants to go home, but finds out he's stuck on the planet until the Council responds. Then we finally get to the key element. What actually happened on the night of the fire? During the evening, Indara gets a reply from the Council. Osha can't be trained, and the Jedi on Brindok are to drop the issue and leave the space witches alone. I'll repeat that. The Council tells the Jedi to leave the space witches alone. So there goes that whole the Jedi kidnap children argument. If ever there was a case to take the kids away, this would be the one, and the Council is like, nah, mind your business. Just remember, the point of the series is to show how the Jedi are flawed and bad, and every chance the writers had to show this, they've made the Jedi look based. I just don't understand how the writers screwed this up this badly. They're completely undermining the premise of their own idea. I don't get it. I don't. How is this? Am I just too smart to figure out how it's this bad? Because I don't know how this happens. I can't even imagine it. You think the writers would catch the mistake as they wrote it because it's so obvious. It's like missing the sun on a clear day. How? If you're outside, you can see it. You can feel it. Shit. This is actually making me angry. I don't understand how it's this bad. Anyway. It's just so... Just... Anyway, Torben hears this and he's ready to go, but Indara tells him that the Council ordered them to continue their mission. This would be another point where in a normal story, there'd be some mention of Anastasia violating Torben as a reason why he'd want to leave, but this isn't that kind of story. Instead, the twins' blood test results come back, and they show that the twins aren't just unusually powerful in the Force, but that they have the same Force signature. This wouldn't happen with twins, meaning that there's something very weird about the girls. According to Torben, they essentially read as the same person, as if a single person had been split into two. This kind of goes back to the saying the girls have about being one and the same, and that whole finger-banging chant. This kind of thing is only possible through a divergence in the Force, so Torben takes off on a speeder to go get the girls because if the Council sees this, then the Council will recall the team, so he can finally go home. This is how the Jedi wind up in the compound. All this craziness happens because this teenager is homesick. Just, you know what? Never mind. Let it go. We're just gonna move on. It's so stupid. It's so fucking stupid, but we're moving on. Now, you remember how May started the fire? Well, that's not exactly what happened. See, her other mother wasn't happy with the idea of Osha leaving, so she attacks May to make sure the girl can defend herself, and then tells her to get mad and stop Osha from going. May destroys the controls to the compound so no one can get in or out, and then her other mother has the witches arm themselves. May then goes to confront Osha and burns Osha's sketchbook, but she drops it, and this is what causes the fire. So basically, it was an accident, except for her locking her sister in the room. That was on purpose. Okay, but that still doesn't explain why there are no fire extinguishers anywhere. It's like May doesn't know what to do. So the Space Witches taught the girls how to finger bang the sky, but not how to put out a fire? And it's by a door in a mountain made of rock, so how in the hell does it spread so fast? Why are there no alarms? Why do none of the grown-ass women in this place do anything to stop it? There's almost 100 people here. Nobody notices? Seriously? No, they're too busy preparing for the Jedi. Sol and Torben arrive, and Sol senses what's happened between the twins. They can't get through the main door, so Sol and Torben scale Mount Vagina in record time to get into the compound. Sol tells Torben to fortify his mind to prevent getting mind raped again, and apparently that's all it takes to stop it from happening. Meanwhile, Indara is on her way with the Wookiee in their ship. Torben and Sol make it inside and get confronted by Anastasia and Other Mother. When Sol asks how the twins were created, Anastasia doesn't answer, but says that someday the Jedi's noble intentions will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy. Okay, but that doesn't explain why this cult of witches is better than the Jedi. Just because they're a family doesn't make them better or even good. The show still hasn't made the case that the Jedi way is bad. Being selfless warriors certainly isn't the greatest thing to do, but that doesn't make it wrong. I'm still waiting for evidence in this show. I know I can find it elsewhere, but it also needs to be in this show because it's the premise of the show. Seems like a fair ask, but We never get that. What we do get is the silliest reason for a fight I've seen in a long time. Other Mother is really hankering for a fight. May comes out screaming about the fire, Soul asks about OSHA, and then Other Mother decides to randomly attack Torben, so Anastasia turns into a black cloud, I guess to attack the Jedi, and then Soul sees that the same thing is happening to May, so Soul stabs Anastasia in cloud form, which somehow works and kills her, and then she tells him as she's dying that she was going to let OSHA go, as if that's why he attacked. What the actual fuck? Seriously, what is happening? I don't understand. I don't understand how it's this bad. Why is any of this happening? First off, what's the deal with the space witches turning into black clouds? That's a Witches of Dathomir trick, but these aren't those witches, so why do they have the same powers? I'm guessing this is the whole power of many nonsense, but it's never explained. Second, why are they jumping to violence over OSHA wanting to leave of her own free will? No one's forced her, no one's tricked her, she's choosing to go, so the witches try to kill the people she wants to go with? And third, why in the holy fuck would you do this black cloud shit in front of a Jedi? Other Mother just randomly attacked Torben. Turning into a black cloud makes it look like you're trying to help her attack the Padawan, but worse, it's affecting May, which is never explained, so what else should Soul do but stab you? This is like waving a gun in front of a cop. They're gonna shoot you, and that's before they realize your ass is black. None of this makes any sense, and it doesn't make the Jedi look like bad guys. The Space Witches, on the other hand, go full villain. Other Mother attacks Soul, but he won't fight back, and that pisses her off. Meanwhile, the other Space Witches shoot Torben with arrows. Really? Really? Right. The Jedi practice blocking beams of light shot out of guns as toddlers. So you gonna shoot some slow-ass arrows at him? Oh, okay. You go, girl. It's just... And do I have to mention the irony of how every time women are in fantasy stories they use bows and arrows? Or can y'all handle that yourselves? So, then it gets sillier, because Other Mother turns into a black cloud too, but instead of preying on Torben, she takes over the mind of the Wookiee and then forces him to fight Soul and Torben, and he just whoops their asses. One, because they're trying not to hurt him, and two, because he's a Wookiee. He just fucks up Torben, scratches his face and tries to cut him in half with his lightsaber. Eventually, Indara comes in for the save and tries to free the Wookiee's mind, and then we see the power of many. Apparently, all the Space Witches are controlling him, or at least tied to his mind, so when Indara frees him, this insta-kills all the witches. Why? Don't ask questions you'll never get the answer to. Now, I have a theory, not about that. I think Other Mother survived, and she's the one controlling Tagalong. This would explain his comment about May always being a problem. Like I said before, he'd have to know her to say that, and if the Space Witches can take over people's bodies, then they could have taken over his. That's my working theory. It's probably wrong, but it does make sense. What doesn't make sense is why Soul winds up saving OSHA but not May. It turns out that when the girls were on the broken bridge, Soul was holding it up with the Force, but he couldn't hold up both sides, so he let go of May's side so he could save OSHA. That's selfish and cruel and pointless because he could have used the Force to levitate both girls, which would have been easier than holding up the bridge. But that would make sense, and this isn't that kind of show, so Soul only saves OSHA. This at least explains Soul's guilt. He chose OSHA over May and killed the girl's mother, with good reason. That's a nice bow to tie up Soul's story. As for Torben, this really doesn't explain a thing. Yes, he acted irrationally, and had he controlled himself, none of this would have happened the way it happened. But he's not totally responsible because the Space Witches weren't going to let OSHA go without a fight. But the writers really try to place the blame on Torben and Soul. So while I was wrong the show would try to tie Tagalong into the events, I was right that the men would be blamed for what happened. This still doesn't explain Torben going into a decade-long meditative state. I mean, his face is jacked up, his mind was violated. I say he paid for his great sin of wanting to go home, because that's why this happened. He wanted to go home. But he didn't make the Space Witches take over the Wookiee's mind. He didn't make Indara free the Wookiee's mind, which apparently killed the witches. He had nothing to do with the fire. He didn't cause OSHA's interest in the outside world. What did he do that would justify his self-imposed penance? We never find out. By the way, even with his face cut up, Indara doesn't seem interested in Torben's condition at all. That's your Padawan. You're supposed to care for him. Literally, you're supposed to take care of him. It'd be nice to see you do it just once. Now, ironically, the greatest sin committed by the Jedi is proposed by Indara. Indara decides that they should report what happened to the Council. Sol wants to tell the Council what he did, but Indara opposes this out of concern of what it would do to Osha. The girl's chances of getting the Council to let her into the Order might be killed if the Council knew exactly what happened, so Indara decides that the truth should be that May started the fire and killed the Space Witches. So, to recap, the men were supposed to be the cause of the problem, but the only one who did anything shady was the woman. Seriously, one job. The writers had one job and they just thoroughly fucked it up. Y'all are really bad at this. I can't believe this is the reason. Everything about this episode is just poorly thought out. That's as kind as I can be. It's just incredibly bad. I can't believe this was the final script. I wouldn't even believe that this was the first draft. This isn't even a treatment. This is a bunch of random ideas on some note cards. This is what's revolutionizing Star Wars? This is what we've been missing? Some convoluted story about culty space witches who attack anybody who questions them, who can't wait to violate the first teenage boy they meet, who attack Jedi unprovoked? And we're supposed to think the Jedi are the bad guys for trying to protect the kids from the creepy fingerbangers? If this is what Disney Star Wars has to offer, clearly they aren't sending their best. But what do I know? I'm just some guy. It's it's so retarded. It's so unbelievably retarded. Just breathe. Okay, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm fine. I'm fine.